All right, we are live. Hey, welcome everybody to the Security Squawk podcast, where we talk about all things business and related to cybersecurity. I'm here with my co-host Reginald Andre out of Miami, Florida. I'm Brian Horning. I'm in Philadelphia. Andre is the CEO of a company named Arc Solvers, and I'm the CEO of a company named Exact IT Solutions. We both basically run similar types of companies where we help businesses with the challenges around cybersecurity. And our hope is that we can educate not only business owners, but everyone about the risks and how they can protect themselves in a world where cyber attacks are increasing every single day. So I want to welcome everyone to our program and start off today with just what's up, Andre? What's going on? How you feeling? Give everyone an update of what's going on with you.
Hey, Brian, and hello, everyone. I'm feeling great. Things are going good on my side. I actually had a prospect that probably been dealing with it for about 3 weeks now, and I honestly thought I wasn't going to get it because it was like a kind of a small deal, about $600 a month, and they didn't have a lot of computers, and they said yes.
You sound surprised even right now.
I am surprised because they went from having a zero IT budget, like they hardly spent a lot of money, and going from zero to about $600 a month. I was myself surprised that they were going to do it.
So why were you surprised?
Um, I think for me, because like we usually we're dealing with bigger deals, and I think for me the confidence that I had was kind of like, well, I've done this before. I've provided the value that we offer to our clients, and typically when that small of a number and that small of amount of employees and computers, they typically aren't ready for that. But it kind of shows the importance of why you should always, don't skip your steps in your sales process. You should always provide the value, give the same energy, give the same attention as if it was the big, $15,000 a month project. So I think that was kind of like the big thing for me, is like I kind of just continued and treated that customer as if they were one of my biggest customers. And I think they appreciated that I just didn't like just send a quote and let them say yes or no, but I actually showed them and was personal with them, and I think they really appreciated that.
Got it. Okay. Cool. I mean, because that's a big deal, in my opinion. I do think a lot of people struggle with the belief, not only in themselves, but in their company and what they can accomplish and what they can do.
Mhm.
So is that kind of what you were struggling with? It was more or less you didn't believe that you could achieve what you could achieve, or was it something else?
Yeah, it was more like I didn't believe that from the beginning. I thought that they were just too small and they were going to say no. That's
I,
what I thought. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was more or less you didn't think that they would come to an agreement or come to see the value in what you were doing, and then you were more or less presently surprised. It wasn't a lack of confidence in your company or your service level. It was more or less like, you know, I know it in our business, we will work with companies who are paying, you know, let's just take a 10-person company, right? And they're paying $300 or $400 a month for their IT support.
Hmm.
You and I both know that's just not a feasible number for that size company.
Right.
And then you're meeting with them and you're explaining to them that you're going from 400, let's just throw out $2,000 as a number. I'm not saying that's what it is, but you're going $1,600 more than what you're used to spending. And yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people in our business that I'm friends with have a tough time with that.
Hmm.
They have a tough time believing that their services are valued at that much, right?
Right.
But on the flip side, we also know that there's IT companies, MSPs out there that try or do charge those types of prices, yet they don't deliver
Hmm.
the same service that maybe you can.
Right.
So I think that's important to point out, because I think we get pigeonholed a lot of times, or a lot of people look at companies in our industry and say, well, they're just an MSP. They're the same as everybody else. They think the people, the way you do things inside of your business, how you've structured it, how you've built processes, how efficient you've become, um, in delivering your services, all matters. And that, isn't evident on the surface a lot of times, but that's really what allows companies like yours and mine to charge what we do. And it's something that I think that gets lost upon a lot of other people and business owners in our industry specifically, because they don't have that belief that somebody will pay them that amount of money for what they do. And again, part of it is because they're not fully mature, because they don't fully understand what the heck is it that they're supposed to be offering and how they're supposed to be working on and improving their company. So, there's a big difference between my business 8 years ago and my business today. And I'm sure the same thing you could say the same thing.
Hmm.
I don't do the tech work, much at all anymore. But back, 8 years ago, I was the main guy that my clients called when they had a technical issue, right? So we've matured our company. We've grown, we've added employees, we've put processes in place, and we've matured our company. So yeah, if you're a solo managed service provider, or you're just an MSP who maybe is by themselves or has one or two employees, it is going to be difficult for you to see how somebody would pay, $300, $400, $500 per employee to work with you. But when you've worked on your company, you've built your company, you've put those things in place, that all requires time, money, and investment, and it costs money. And you can't charge, a company that's 10 users a few $100 a month and grow to a point where you're a company who can charge 300, 400, 500 an employee, which is, quite frankly, if you're sitting here going, I would never pay 300 an employee for IT and cybersecurity services. I hate to break it to you, but that's where the market's at. And if you're paying less than that, you probably have more risk in your business than you think you have, and you're probably being underserved, meaning you think certain things are being done and they're really not. And you're going to get punched in the face one day when something happens, and then you turn to your IT company and say, I thought you were doing this for us. And then you quickly found out that they're not doing that for you. Right.
Right.
I mean, I see that all day in our business, and I don't know if you have the same perspective, but it's almost like a vicious cycle. If you don't charge enough money, you can't mature your company. You're going to kind of stay in the same spot. You know what I mean? Like you don't have that extra runway to build your company. And as if you're in the business, if you're not an IT company and you're listening to this, and you have a business and you work with, or you're thinking about hiring an outsourced MSP, cybersecurity company, IT provider, and your thought process is that we're going to pay a certain amount and we're not going to pay any more, that's really not the way that you want to approach buying services from companies like us, because you're going to end up going with a company that's going to give you the lowest price. And in my experience, which is auditing MSPs, going in and running assessments against other MSPs, we know that MSPs traditionally are asleep at the wheel, or they cut corners and don't do things that they promise in their marketing that they're going to do. So, I think it's important for people to realize that, there's a big difference between a mature company and a company that might charge what you perceive to be expensive versus a company that, you feel is cheaper or a lot more in line with what you want to pay, because everybody wants to pay less, of course. But at the end of the day, if you get punched in the face, you better hope you're with a good IT company that can get you out of a really ugly situation. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but belief in your IT company that believes that they're the best, and they don't just talk about it, that you actually see their talk reflected in their work and the quality of their work. You can pretty much bet you're with a good IT company. If you don't get the sense that company is backing up what they promised in their marketing, and it's not reflective in their people and their culture, you might have hired the wrong company. So, so anything you want to add to that?
No, we're good.
All right. So yesterday, Andre, I did a YouTube video on my own channel over at Exact IT Solutions, where I talked about the fact that cyber attack attempts have gone up 20% in 2020.
Wow.
I'm sure that doesn't surprise you, that number.
Right.
But that's the reality, I guess, of where we're at with cybersecurity right now. Hang on one second. And then if you break down the numbers, the 20% increase from 2019 to 2020, and you look at the increase, that breaks down to 119,000 cyber attack attempts per minute in 2020.
Wow.
So, in other words, what I'm saying is people are banging on your front door or checking your windows in your house to see if they can break in 119,000 times every single minute. And I can only imagine in 2021 that's going to increase, because I don't really feel like we're in a spot where we're able to make that number go down. So the reason I bring that up is because you and I were talking in the green room about about something that happened out in Kentucky, and I'm going to bring it up on the screen here.
Sure.
But it's something that we were talking about in Kentucky that happened in the past. I don't know. It was probably.
It was actually yesterday, Wednesday.
Yesterday, February 25th. It was posted today, and it happened yesterday. So I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to kind of bring this up here. And why don't you kind of give our audience the high-level details of what is going on here in Kentucky and why it relates to what I just mentioned about the 192,000 hack attempts every minute.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, Kentucky's unemployment office, they had a attempted cyber attack. So when we say attempted, it's because essentially the hackers, what they did is what we call a dictionary attack. Mm-hmm. And just like a dictionary, you could have, the word and definition. Well, in this case, you have a username and you have a password. And what they attempted to do is to take this list, this dictionary that they have, and just slam the Kentucky's unemployment site with all of these different username and passwords, because they know the statistics shows that I believe it's around 80-something percent, 82% of people reuse their passwords.
Right.
So they have usernames or email addresses, they have the passwords, and their hopes was that they would then be able to get into this unemployment site. And of course, with unemployment, we're talking about payments, right? So more than likely, once they got in, they would probably want to change the banking information to, to a different bank, et cetera. So that's essentially what it didn't happen, but this is essentially what the article is talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because you rarely hear about something like this. You usually hear about a successful hack attempt, and this is more or less like they tried, and we were aware of it, but they didn't get in, which is a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
You as a cybersecurity professional, you would like to see more of these types of stories than, hey, somebody got hacked. Again, this is still falls in line with a reportable breach, right? Because somebody tried to get into their system. So at the end of the day, you have to kind of report this. But why I mentioned that is because a lot of companies don't. And if you're in a business where there's compliance and you're required either in your industry or by your state to disclose when things like this happen, I just don't know of a lot of companies that are out there basically saying like, we detected these hacking attempts and they were unsuccessful, and we're just reporting it as we're supposed to do. That to me just doesn't happen. So I don't know if you're aware of any similar stories like this, but I'm glad to hear that nobody got in, and this is an example of how this goes down, because how many passwords need to be right in order for them to get in, right? One.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They're just one password needs to match a username that they have. Um, but this happens every single day. Probably millions of times a day, hackers are running these tools that use a dictionary database to then try to crack passwords and get into networks. The good thing here, in my opinion, from a cybersecurity analyst standpoint, is that they had the infrastructure and technology in place to detect this.
Yeah.
A lot of companies don't. And if you have no idea how to tell if your systems are being, somebody's jiggling your front door, you want to know about that, and trying to get in. If you don't have the technologies in place, you might want to call a cybersecurity company or work with a cybersecurity expert to get that in place, because 5 years ago that wasn't so easy. Today it's very easy to get things in place where they look at and monitor who's logging into what and if they're successful or not, and you should be alerted if there are a massive amount of invalid attempts on a system.
Yeah.
So good one. So this leads into the opposite. What we're going to talk about next is when you don't have, good password hygiene, and people are able to use dictionary attacks and information on the dark web to then get access to systems that they shouldn't have. And that happened over here. Let me just jump out of full screen real quick if I can.
While you're doing that, kind of a little joke is, for every one article that you see that someone's actually saying, hey, there was a cyber attempt, I would say there's probably 200 IT guys having beer because they didn't get attacked. Like, just to show you, like, so every night you probably have like 200 guys having beer somewhere, being like, man, we're so glad this didn't happen, or whatever, for every that one article.
I mean, yeah, that's one way to look at it. Or you could look at it as, for every cyber attack you see in the news, there's a whole slew of cybersecurity professionals that are stressing out because
this is true.
they're working on a breach that is not in the news.
Yes, exactly.
So, That's the important thing I think people really need to understand, is that what we cover and what's public is only about 10% of the actual attacks that actually happen. So there's a massive amount of cybersecurity professionals and IT professionals who are, dealing with this. And you know, you might be the person in charge when the attack went down, and your stress level is going to be high. And when teams come in to do, an evaluation on what happened, that's stressful, because you have to take systems down, you have to take things offline to really evaluate them, and companies don't want to be taken offline. That struggle between cybersecurity and making sure that business continues to move forward. And that's, I think where the business people and the people that need to keep the business running and make money, and the security people are butting heads a lot, because, when there's an event, sometimes you have to hit pause on things, and that doesn't sit well with a lot of guys who are in charge of making sure that the money's still coming in the door.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what happened here in New York State? As I mentioned and alluded to, it's the opposite of what we just talked about in Kentucky.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, New York State audited 3 school districts, and just to do like a cyber assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found is that they had many of the school districts having accounts that they never closed. So, for example, they did an audit between 2018 and 2020, and they identified 224 accounts belonging to the senior class who had already graduated that should have been disabled or deleted.
Jeez.
And in addition to that, they found another 63 unneeded network user accounts. So these are like network admin accounts that were not used for the last 6 months and should have been also deleted or disabled.
So that's just an example of the complete opposite, right? Somebody was able to use information that was already out there on the dark web or someplace, and then breach these accounts. And or if you're not disabling them and you're not monitoring whether somebody's trying to log into them, you could run a big dictionary across those accounts to try to get into them.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, if you're in an organization like that, that you probably have a lot of different accounts at your disposal. If you can figure out that practice is happening, you're not disabling X accounts of people that are no longer part of the organization. And quite frankly, that's a big thing with colleges. And I think we've mentioned this before, but colleges, a lot of times, colleges are a favorite target for spammers to try to get hold of accounts, because a lot of times colleges, as a quote unquote benefit, give their alumni a perpetual email account .edu for that from the school. And a lot of times people, when they leave the university or college, they don't ever log back into that email account ever again, and they never think about it. But they're still active, they're still able to be used. Quite frankly, a .edu address is a very reputable source. So if you can get control of it, you have a very good chance of getting your spam through spam filters and everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these kind of dormant accounts that lay out there are favorites of hackers. And every organization needs to have a process in place for evaluating accounts that are active and making sure you're either disabling or getting rid of them on a regular basis. We've audited companies where they've had employees with active accounts for 8, 10 plus years. It was the last time they logged into the system.
Yeah.
I had one guy who told me, when we run these tools, it's not like these tools come back with like bad information, right? If you have an account in your system that hasn't been logged into in 8 years, and my system, when I run a scan, it tells me that, that's not like made up fabricated information, but I'll have people challenge me on this stuff. Like they'll be like, there's no way, usually it's the person in charge of making sure that that stuff's not happening. But we audited a company in the real estate space once, and I personally knew the employee that we told them, this account is active and I know this person and he hasn't worked for your company it was like 7 or 8 years, and he's moved on 3 companies since he worked for this company.
Wow.
And like I knew the guy, and and even then they were just like, no way, we don't have that many accounts that are out there. And I'm like, it was I'm going to say this, it was over 100 user accounts that were on the system that we found that were dormant and nobody was logging into them.
Wow.
Yeah. So Kroger, talk to us about this one. This is another supply chain type of attack, which is kind of like the attack du jour right now.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of supply chain attacks are being revealed and are being successfully deployed. So talk to us about this supply chain attack at Kroger. What happened? Shoot.
Yeah, so Kroger has a legacy system. So a legacy system is essentially an application, a program that you're using, but maybe you're just keeping it around because you're in the process of upgrading it, or you just need it archived. So like think of if you have QuickBooks, and maybe you moved everything to the cloud, but maybe you still have your company files, and once in a while you'll need to go in and take a look at it. Well, in this sense, because it's a legacy application, that application no longer is getting updates. And because it doesn't get updates, if there's a vulnerability that's found later on, no one's updating it, and now your entire system is affected. So that's essentially what happened with Kroger, where one of their legacy systems got affected essentially, and then the bad guys were able to get into the system that way.
So yeah, I mean, it's another example of companies that, buy a third-party piece of software or use a third-party service, and then they have an incident because of a vulnerability or something in that software. Now, the interesting thing is that if you do cybersecurity the right way, and that's my opinion, obviously, what the right way is, but you're running scans for vulnerabilities, constantly, and you should know when you have vulnerabilities on your network. So not only is it a failure of Kroger to kind of make sure that they have the proper service plans in place and they're not using outdated or legacy software in their environment, that's a big one. If anybody's using software that doesn't receive updates anymore, you might as well, you got a pretty sure bet that your software is going to have a vulnerability at some point and is going to be able to be used as an attack vector for a hacker. So, it's important to make sure that, you may think in your mind, I'm not going to pay this company, $1,000 a year just to get updates or just to get support, but that is what that is meant for. It is meant for you to pay that amount so they can invest in making sure that the software remains secure and doesn't cause a problem in your business. If you choose to opt out of that, then that risk then falls to you. But in this case, with a legacy system, and then the fact that it was on their network, and from a software and network vulnerability scanning standpoint, either they knew that this vulnerability existed and chose to do nothing about it, or they weren't looking for it and they didn't care. So it was a case of what I kind of talk about all the time is either you're burying your head in the sand or you're just deciding not to take care of it. And that's the way I look at it. I don't know if you have a different opinion, but that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, but I mean, customers, if we put our feet in customers' shoes, a lot of times they're just like, hey, like I've had this. I have a manufacturing firm, and they have a legacy system that prints a special label,
Mm-hmm.
and they just never got around to it or cared for upgrading this system to a new system. And it's a computer in the back, and the only reason I kind of allow it is because it's not connected to an Ethernet port. So it's kind of separate from the entire network. When they want to print, they have to then take a special like SD card type of thing and then let the job go. But once you have a legacy system connected to your network, you're just like what you just said. You're asking for trouble. It's only a matter of time.
So, but as we like to point out, here's our favorite statement.
Yeah.
The day after the attack, and then it's followed up with they initiated their own forensic investigation to review potential scope and impact of the incident, right? So you can't say this, just a word of caution to companies if you're ever breached. You can't say this right here until this is done. So talk about putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
Don't make these kind of statements until your forensic investigation and review is done and you know the scope and impact of the incident. Because Andre and I talk about this all the time on this channel, and it's quite simply that these companies come out way, way, way too soon with the statement that they have no credit card or debit card or personal information out there. And then, a month or two later on the dark web, here's all this information. It's like, oh, this looks like it's all Kroger customers. All right, man, we're going to wrap up here today.
All right.
We're about a half hour into our podcast, so we're right on time. I don't know much about this, so I'm going to take a step back and let you talk. I am not keeping up with this particular series of events. Quite frankly, I don't care what they have to say. I've covered this enough where I know what's going on. But why don't you give us kind of like high level what happened yesterday, who was brought in, why were they brought in, and what did they talk about?
Yeah, sure. So you had, this is regarding the SolarWinds event, the big event that in 9 federal agencies and 18,000 companies in the US got affected with this. And essentially, who was there? You had Microsoft was there, SolarWinds, of course, FireEye, and a company called CrowdStrike, which is providing remediation services to SolarWinds. So that's who was there. And who wasn't there was Amazon. And that was even a big issue because Amazon, the web service, that's the way the attack happened was from a US server. And essentially, it was on an Amazon server. So it was very surprising that Amazon sent no representatives. Microsoft sent their president. The other two companies sent their team.
I understand why Amazon, quite frankly, didn't send a representative. Because Amazon's in the business of providing web hosting.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody decides to use one of their servers in the U.S. as a mark off point or as a VPN, that's kind of why Amazon exists. I mean, that's not out of the terms of service to use an Amazon server as a VPN. It's not out of the terms of service for Amazon for you to spin up a server and use it to do various things. I mean, it's very common, and I don't think that, whether they used Amazon, Google, all these servers exist, and we can go rent them today, right? I could end this podcast and I could go spin up an Amazon server in about 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't see, other than the fact that their infrastructure was used, I don't see why they would need to be called in, because you can't say to Amazon, you can't rent to, what are you going to say? You can't rent services to X, Y, and Z. If you're if it is who they say they are, and it's Russian state sponsored, you don't think Russians have entities set up here in the U.S. with credit cards and bank accounts and stuff that they can easily use to buy these servers? So to Amazon, it looks like they've rented the server to a U.S. citizen or somebody who's in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
who has a credit card. You can't buy an Amazon server without a credit card.
Right.
You got a credit card on file.
Right.
So I feel like it's splitting hairs a little bit, but Amazon, I don't feel like they need to be there because their network and they were not breached. It was, they were the lily pads that these attackers used to kind of make themselves be able to get into things or not tip anybody off to anything, not be geo blocked because look, I mean, most cybersecurity people geo block, in countries that they're not doing business in. And that's how you get around it. You buy a server in the United States and you use that server as your jumping off point. So continue on.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what you're saying with Amazon, and I could see Amazon saying, wait, this is just going to be a soundbite that the senators and politicians want to use to then make us look bad. So why even show up? But at the same, and I'm sure the FBI and other, agencies have already went to Amazon and says, hey, we need the credit card number, we need the IP address that they registered from. So
turn all that over.
Yeah, so there's nothing the senators are going to
Capitol Hill like that. I agree with you.
Yeah, but it was just going to be for a soundbite. And also because everybody is pointing fingers at everybody. CrowdStrike is pointing fingers at Microsoft, saying your infrastructure the way you design it and your architect is bad. Your Windows is complicated. And then Microsoft is blaming SolarWinds because they said that their stuff was designed wrong. So of course, Amazon would have probably been sitting there and says, well, Amazon, it's your fault. How did you not know it was a Russian corporation? So everybody was pointing fingers. It was 3 hours of, if you ever been in these watch any of these things, it was 3 hours. And at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway I saw was then even the corporations pointing the fingers back at the politicians and saying, you guys need to put a regulation in place. You guys need to put something where if a company is hacked, there's a procedure that they have to follow. There's like a federal police report type of thing that they have to submit to you so that we can do information sharing so that we can know what's going on.
Who was saying that?
The corporations, Microsoft, SolarWinds, Cyber, they were all basically pointing the finger back at the government saying more is needed.
More is needed.
As far as laws to when it comes to disclosing, and they also mention when it comes to protecting, because they're saying that if a company got hacked, they're afraid of the ramifications from the end user, from the government, from and obviously the news and media and things like that. So they actually said one of the things that should be done is kind of like a whistleblower thing where, hey, if we tell you we got hacked, you federal government protect us from the attorneys coming to sue us. So essentially saying, hey, if we're sloppy in our work and there's a cyber attack, we want protection so that we're not sued if we come out and tell you we were sloppy. Which I found very interesting.
Well, I mean, I just look at it this way. These companies need to take a hard look at their own cybersecurity practices. And if they are following the NIST cybersecurity framework to the highest level, which these companies should. If you're a Fortune 500 company, you should be following at least 171 controls within the NIST 800. So are they saying if we're following this, we want protection? Because it's one thing to say that and say like, hey, if we're doing everything we possibly can, we want protection. But if you're saying like, hey, we're just going to continue to operate, we're not going to follow any framework, and we're not going to be, held accountable to that framework, and we just want protection because we're too big to fail type of
Right.
scenario. That's what I hear. That's what I kind of keep thinking when you were talking. It's like, it sounds like these big companies are saying, like, we're too big to be dealing with this,
Right.
and we don't want to deal with it. So,
But Brian, let me ask the question though. But are you telling me that Microsoft, SolarWinds, FireEye, they don't have NIST engineers, they don't have full-time departments that are actually going through that list to make sure they're in compliance? Like they have to be, right?
I don't know. I don't work at those companies. All I know is they got hacked. They didn't know they were under attack. And I guarantee you, if they actually had a full audit done, there would be gaps found. I'm not saying they're not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying there's a human element involved here. And when you're talking about massive amounts of companies, you have this same challenge going on that you have in every single business that's faced with this problem, which is every business right now, which is you have finite resources, money, people, time. You have to make sacrifices, right? So we're never going to live in an environment where we're 100% secure from anything. But I guess my point is if you're gonna ask for that level of um, it's almost like a get out of jail free card.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to ask for that level of clemency from the government and the private space, the media, your customers. If you're going to ask for that, you need to prove that you're doing it. So when do we have a government? When do we have? There are government or private industry. You can do it in both ways. I don't know what the best solution is right now, but there are private entities that will certify things that adhere to a certain standard, and then or you can have the government take on that, and the government is kind of doing that with CMMC. Does CMMC bleed over into every business now? That we look at cybersecurity as a homeland security issue, and now we need to have private businesses adhere to the same NIST 800 standards that we're making government contractors follow.
Mm-hmm.
And then have assessors and people who audit businesses, and then you have like that seal of approval on your business that you do things the right way. And then that's how you get the protection of whatever they're asking for, but you can't just give out protection to a company and not evaluate how they're doing cybersecurity.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I look at it. Like if they want that level, if any business wants that level of protection, get audited. Have somebody review your business practices, and against the controls that are out there, and you get audited. And once you get audited, you're then allowed to display a certain badge or letter that says that you've been audited and you follow and adhere to a strict cybersecurity framework.
You see, but okay, but then what about the medical field with HIPAA? I don't know but how many assessments have you done at medical offices, and you go in and you're like, oh my gosh, like, and these doctors just don't care. And but at the same time, there's nobody really, not, there's no teeth in it, if that's a good, way of saying it.
There is teeth. There is actually teeth in it. There's actually teeth in HIPAA. And it's becoming, I think it was a fallacy, like when HIPAA first came out, and then a couple years in, these doctors are like, oh, HIPAA's no big deal, I don't have to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
There was 2020 was the highest year for fine HIPAA violations. they're only going to get better at this. They're going to have more auditors. I mean, this is new. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like the IRS that's been around forever and ever and ever that they know what they're doing. They know how to audit companies and individuals, and they know what they're looking for. That's going to happen with this. And they are going to figure out systems, and they're going to put enough resources in place where they can do these audits, and there's going to be more HIPAA violations. And plus, once the government figures out that they can make money off of HIPAA audits, look out.
Yeah.
The hope is that you give people enough warning and enough time to put this in place. There's going to become a point in time where doctors are going to hate HIPAA because everybody's getting hit left and right. And then you also have the Medicare and Medicaid issue.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do HIPAA right, you can't bill Medicare and Medicaid anymore, and you're screwed.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal for a lot of doctors and a lot of medical practices. You get put on the Medicare blacklist, you're basically accepting cash at your doctor's office. So that's where I think things are going when you're asking for things like this. It's disheartening to me to hear that they were pointing fingers at one another, because we all have to work together. The supply chain attacks are the writing on the wall that everybody needs to work together to make things more secure. And I don't blame the hackers. The hackers are the ones who bring to light the problems. It's on the companies to make sure that they're doing this stuff the right way. And unfortunately, that means you're going to have to spend more money. And people hate to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
But this has come on so quickly that businesses are completely unprepared for what they're going to have to pay for this. So, the best thing you can do is start preparing today.
Yeah.
Because every day that you don't prepare, you're building that technology debt, like I talk about. Mm-hmm. Every day you kick it down the road, just like the U.S. debt clock, that technology debt clock is moving higher on your business. Every day you don't address it. Every day you bury your head in the sand as a CEO, and you don't spend 6 to 10 or more % of your total revenue on your cybersecurity and on your IT. If you're not meeting those kind of benchmarks, and that's a rough number, you're probably going to be punched in the mouth one day by a cyber attack. And that's just the reality.
Yeah.
So that's it for me, brother. We're 47 minutes in. Do you have anything else that you want to discuss with our audience today? I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
One cool feature that finally Microsoft did was that they enabled two-form factor authentication anytime you set up a new email account, where before it was not mandatory. So
right.
They force it. So that was a cool thing that I saw, and at least Microsoft is taking that extra step when it comes to securing emails.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but don't always, with that same, I love that they're doing that, but I think sometimes what happens when companies force like 2FA to be used when you log in the accounts, just don't rely on companies to do that. Just go ahead and start doing that on your own.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't shoot me because I know I said I wouldn't talk about Clubhouse, but I have on my profile on Clubhouse with 2 red sirens. It says, Clubhouse, please enable 2FA on your application. Because every time I log into something, if it doesn't allow me the option or doesn't prompt me to turn on 2-factor authentication, that's a red flag. I might even stop, not go into that or disable my account or something like that. I mean, it's rare today you run into an application that doesn't offer 2-factor authentication. But my point is that don't rely on these companies to force you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just start getting in the habit of going after you create an account, after you sign up for a new website, new service. go into the settings and see if they have the two-factor option and turn it on. You know, get comfortable using the Google Authenticator app. It's your friend. You know, so that's what I'll leave everybody with for this week's podcast. I think that was a great point, Andre. Two-factor is important. I'm glad Microsoft is forcing it, but keep your own house in order first. Don't let other people, you know, kind of dictate how you handle your cybersecurity. Take it into your own hands. Set up your own two-factor on all your accounts. Be mindful when you log into, especially banking websites and anything that's sensitive to you. If you're not being prompted for two-factor, figure out why you may have trusted the device and it doesn't ask you. That's okay. But make sure you at least have it turned on. Go in the settings and just see if it's turned on. If it's not, turn it on.
Yeah, and for that business owner, that goes even a little more detailed where do a technology audit where anything that any of your employees are using to log in that, you know, for an online service, and you go through that list, and then, you know, you maybe as a global setting, you can just force it that next time the employee logs in, they have to do that. But don't rely on your employees to turn it on.
No.
Yeah.
All right, brother.
Okay.
I think today's episode was awesome. We talked about a lot. We covered a lot. I think we shared a lot of good business advice around, you know, the cybersecurity incidents. It's not, you know, we don't just talk tech here. And if anybody that's listening learned anything today, was entertained in any way by Andre and I, please share out this podcast on your social media to your friends. That's the only request that we asked for putting out this content to you for free. And if you have any questions about anything we said here today, we do have this recorded on our Facebook page. It's a Security Squawk Facebook page. And we also live stream this as well to YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel. If you search on Google for Security Squawk Podcast, it will come up on YouTube. The URL, unfortunately, is very long right now. It's not custom yet because we don't have enough subscribers. So maybe head over to YouTube and subscribe to our podcast channel. That would be awesome. But that's it for us. I say sayonara. Have a great week. We'll all talk to you next week. Andre, we're good. Peace out. Bye, everyone.